Because many of you have known Angela and gotten to know her over the years, and some of you may not be as familiar. Angela is somebody who came into this world with a lot of passion, with a lot of purpose. And at the beginning, it was centered on sports. We have with us a two-time Olympian with Angela as she represented the country of Brazil at two Olympics. And then, she thought to herself, well, I've done the Olympics, what else could there be? And so she started her spiritual journey. And in that, she found the work of Joel Goldsmith. In that, she found the spiritual foundation that she received at the Joré Center. And she became their spiritual leader at the Joré Center for over 13 years. It was then, yes, she also found unity. And she walked into these stores in 2005. She began to be involved. She began to take classes. She began to recognize even more fully her connection to these principles. And in 2018, she also received Unity on the Bay's President's Award for Leadership for all of the ways that she has led and supported and guided the spiritual community with her dedication. And now she is blessing us not only with her meditations that she normally does on a regular basis, but with her first official talk at Unity on the Bay. So please let me join me in welcoming up here Reverend Angela Ribeiro.
Thank you. What a joy to be here today sharing with you the things that I'm passionate about. And once again, I really appreciate all the love and all the support that I have received from all of you these past years. And so as you notice, the topic of today's talk is activating our spiritual GPS. But before we go there, I would like to ask, how many of you usually use a GPS when you go into a location that you're not familiar with? How many of you try? Wow, look at this. We're all using GPS lately, huh? And the interesting thing is that if you miss the exit or if you made a wrong turn, the GPS will adjust itself and continue to guide us to our final destination. But here's the good news. There is something greater than the GPS, which is a spiritual GPS that is already present within each one of us. And when we learn how to activate our awareness to it, not only it can take us to be at the right place and at the right time, but it can begin to serve as a magnet for the fulfillment of every need that we have. I like how Michael Beckford calls it the presence within. And this is what he has to say. When we align ourselves with the presence within, we move from struggle to flow, from fear to faith, from limitation to possibility. So I'm going to give a little illustration here for us to see the difference between living with not an awareness of this guiding system versus living in alignment with this guiding system. So let's say that we decided to go canoeing in a river, but because of our own ignorance, we're swimming, we're rowing the canoe against the flow of the river. So it feels like this efforting, we're looking for our good outside of ourselves, so we are efforting to try to get that good to come to us. Not only that, we associate our sense of worthiness with what we do. So here we are spinning the wheel just so that we can feel worthy. Versus learning how to turn that canoe around with spiritual practices and begin to flow with the current of the river, allowing its wisdom to lead the way, to show us how to live a joyous, happy, abundant, and fulfilled life. So I have another question here for you. How many of you would love to activate your capacity to tap into the spiritual GPS within you and live in the flow? Live with grace. Many, oh, that's great. Most of you do, but here's the caveat. Unless we recognize the importance of such a connection, and unless we make it a priority in our lives, we're going to be distracted with all kinds of shiny objects out there, and we are going to miss the way. So when we begin to recognize the importance of it, actually I love how our master teacher Joshua, also known as Jesus, he tells us little stories known as parables that guide us into have an idea of what does it take to regain this connection. And one of those parables is called the parable of the merchant. So you have this merchant who went out looking for pearls of great value, pearls of great price. Eventually he found one and he sold everything that he had in order to get that pearl. So here in this little story, it's telling us the importance of recognizing its value and doing what it takes in order to be able to get it. So once we realize the importance of it, once we are ready to make it a priority in our lives, it's important to understand that most likely we are not going to be able to perceive this vast field of guiding intelligence with our 5 physical senses. It will take us to develop a 6th sense, so to speak, or more like a spiritual antenna that can allow us to capture something that is already here. I'm going to use another illustration here. Let's say that we are all aware of that there is all kinds of radio waves around here right now. We cannot perceive those waves with our 5 physical senses, but if we have a radio and if we turn on and if we tune in, we're going to be able to capture that radio wave and it will become tangible in our experience. So the same thing happens. So we're going to be talking about ways in which we can develop that spiritual antenna, but parallel to that, and just as important, we need to begin to pay attention to what is obstructing our perception of this field so that we can begin to consciously let go. Because unless we are aware of what is obstructing, it will continue to obstruct in the background and keeps us in imitation. So even though there's quite a few things that can block our perception, there's one of them that is considered to be the greatest obstacle. And the interesting thing is that we are all addicted to it, but we are not aware of. So I'd like to ask anybody would like to guess, what do you think it is? I know that some of us may think that, we don't have any addiction problems, but there's one thing most of us are addicted to, but we are not aware. Who would like to take a guess? Those who were here in the first service, you cannot say anything. Oh my God, somebody already guessed right. Okay, all right, okay. Thinking, the monkey mind. When the monkey mind is extremely active, taking us to the future and the past, we miss the present moment where the connection can take place. So unless we begin to train ourselves to come to the present moment, it's going to be impossible. So look at what Eckhart Tolle had to say. What is the greatest obstacle to experiencing this reality? Identification with your mind, which causes thought to become compulsive. Not to be able to stop thinking is a dreadful affliction, but we don't realize this because almost everybody is suffering from it. So it is considered normal. And I was watching a video and somebody was interviewing Eckhart Tolle, and they asked, what's the major difference that you can experience before you had your awakening and afterwards? And he said that before he had his awakening experience, his mind was active 80% of the time. But when he had that awakening experience, his mind was in the present mode awareness 80% of the time, and only 20% of the time he was active. And he said that he began to spend a lot of time sitting in a park bench just being. And he said he was so full of bliss that at that moment, nothing that the world could give it to him, not a job, not a car, not a soulmate, not a house, nothing that the world could give it to him could have made him feel more joyous and blissful than he already was. So he was able to tap into his own essence, our own essence, and be able to experience that sense of bliss in spite of what's going on around the world. So the question is, how can we develop that spiritual antenna? How can we experience that where he was saying all this bliss, all this joy, all this peace? How can we do it? Let's say what Buddha has to say. He has an advice for us. According to Buddha, not me, according to Buddha, wisdom springs from meditation. Without meditation, wisdom wanes. Once again, recognizing the value of present moment awareness, mindfulness, calm down the monkey mind. The mind is a tool. We need to develop the ability to put that thing down and rest. And I know it's hard to rest. Sometimes our mind is so active because of the addiction. But we need to recognize the value and begin to put it into practice. Now, knowing how important meditation is and mindfulness is not going to do the trick. According to unity principle number 5, unless we put those things into practice, it's just going to be a theory in the mind. And what I've noticed, there was a time in my life that I thought that if I just read all these books and if I just watch all these videos and if I contemplate those things, that eventually something's going to click within myself and that which I understood intellectually will become eventually a conviction in my heart. But what I've noticed is that when we don't train our mind to relax, when we are faced with something difficult, it begins to go on and on and on, and worst case scenario movies, and we become extremely anxious. And that was what happened to me. Even though I had all the understanding of the 5 unity principles and I knew everything, when pandemic hit, and I begin to entertain one worst case scenario after another, I begin to have almost like a panic attack. And that's when I realized, you know what? I need to do something different. And I realized that I have never committed to the practice of meditation. And I thought maybe when my back up against the wall, that would be a good time to do it. Don't wait until your back is up against the wall. You don't have to wait that long. But, I was a little stubborn. I said, I'm going to give it a try, Meditation is overstated. I don't need it. I've done that. Nothing happened. But I decided to make the commitment, and it's been like 5 years now. And what I've noticed with the consistent practice of meditation, it can begin to help us create a separation between ourselves and our thoughts. Remember, the Eckhart Tolle said that identification with the thought is the problem. So when we begin to create a separation and have a taste of ourselves as this peaceful observer that can watch thoughts come by, it can watch circumstances come by, but it's peaceful and it's observing. So when we create a separation, we are much better able to choose which thoughts we are going to embrace and which thoughts we're going to let it go. When you look at the story of the co-founders of Unity, both Charles and Mauro Fillmore, they were very dedicated to their spiritual practices. And I remember on their early stages, Charles Fillmore decided to make the commitment that every night before he goes to sleep, he was going to start meditation. And his intent, he was very clear what his intent was to connect with the headquarters. He was very businesslike, I know that there is such a thing as a headquarters. I want to connect with it. I'm going to be disciplined with my practices. So he entered into meditation with the openness. I want to have a connection. He was inviting this presence almost to reveal itself to him. Several months went by, nothing happened, but he was feeling good. So he decided to keep on keeping on. And eventually he did reach the headquarters, which led to the movement that we have today. I was over Unity Village 2 weeks ago. We were able to go to the Silent Unity. And one of the things that I've learned that is that back in the days, they used to receive about 88,000 prayer requests a year. Now, they receive 1.8 million prayer requests a year. So the movement, yeah. See, this is a spirit-led movement, and it continues to go on and on. Now, the important thing to remember is that we're not going to go from 20% with the ability to stay still to 80% right away. It's something that will progress into it. But the key here is that we begin to do it not as a sprint or a marathon, because even the sprint and the marathon has a beginning and an end. This is an invitation to change our way we live. So it's an invitation to begin to acquire healthy daily habits of mind that would allow us to eventually begin to transition from 20% to 30% present, from 30% to 40% present, eventually move to 60% present, and we begin to see the transformation that takes place in our lives. But it's by building it up little by little. For those of you who are familiar with the book Atomic Habits, anyone familiar with the book Atomic Habits? Really good book. So James Clear, the author of the book, he says this: tiny habits practiced daily eventually compound into remarkable results. So when we begin to make the commitment, and I'm going to invite you, if you have not committed to meditation, just give it a try, 5 minutes a day. But this is what happened. When we begin to commit and we are persistent with the practice, that's how we begin to be able to see some transformation in the long run. Now, when I sit in meditation, I'm not able to get my mind still most of the time. But what I try to do that have worked really well, I try to take some plunges into inner stillness, even if for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, we get so quiet, and then the mind begins to get busy again. And then later on, we do the same thing. We take those plunges. And what happens is we begin to become familiar with that state, and as we bring our awareness of it, it begins to grow and expand. And the second thing that we can also do is to begin to bring that practice into our daily routine. Practicing doing ordinary activities and begin to transform them into active meditation just by consciously choosing to be present with whatever it is that you are doing. See, it's not about what we are doing, it's about the attitude with which we are taking the action. And if we begin to consciously choose, I'm going to bring my awareness, I'm going to be fully present. What am I doing? I'm developing the spiritual muscle of making sure that I can choose where I put my focus of attention at. And as I begin to master my inner universe, I begin to see changes outside of myself. So to bring this message to a conclusion, is a hint for the choir to come back. To bring this message to a conclusion, not today? Are you not coming back today? All right, I have another minute. Okay. So change progress from this morning. You have to adapt. But to bring this message to a conclusion, this guiding system, which is much better than a regular GPS, is already present and available to each one of us. But unless we recognize the importance of it, unless we begin to make it a priority in our lives, unless we begin to set up time in the day to put into practice the ability to put down that tool, to relax, to quiet the monkey mind, to be more and more present, we will be able to touch our essence, just as Eckhart Tolle did, and be able to experience a life of joy and fulfillment in spite of what's going on outside in the world. Thank you very much for being here with me this morning. I really appreciate that. Thank you.